Hello, I call this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. I even have my agenda up right now. We have all of us board members here tonight: Jack Nicolai, Steve Brown, myself, Dana Powers, Ted Gergen, and Nick Poloni. And then we have our whole admin team here: Ryan Sandberg, Judy Marachkowski, Patty Fitzgerald, Mark Hez Guzman, and Dr. Connie Valenza. Visitors, we don't have any. Stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will take a motion on the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. I still have my agenda up. I do not have anything to report at this time. We have the administrator search. Oh, thank you. We have administrator search information coming later on tonight, and we'll go through that then. And Connie.
So we're on a spotlight. This is a non-traditional spotlight, but in talking with our administrative team, we'd just like to spotlight all of our staff for their unwavering dedication to meeting the needs of our students and families. This is our third COVID year, and it's been draining. We all thought it would be better this year. They're running on empty, yet they continue to step up every day. They're our most important asset as a school district. They need support, patience, and grace from our district, our families, and our community. So sincerely to our staff, thank you. So that's all I have.
Amen to that. Steve?
Yes, and I concur totally with Connie with regards to what you just said, Connie. An update on the election information. There are two people who have taken out candidacy papers for the school board positions, Steve Brown and Ted Gergen. There will be no primary for this election. The drawing of the lots took place and names will appear on the ballot in the following order. First on the ballot, Ted Gergen. Second on the ballot, Steve Brown. There are 2 seats open on the board. Both of these are 3-year terms, and the election date is April 5th of 2022. That's all I have, Madam President.
Fantastic. Ted?
All right, let's take a look at the treasurer's report dated December 2021. General fund cash account with a balance of $867,583.32, and you can see that went up because we received our tax payments from some of the municipalities. Credit card balance $30,134.39. EBC Flex and HRA cash account of $5,047.42. Capital Improvement Fund, Fund 46, $2,082,180.55. Petty cash, $200. LGIP, $500,039.35, for a grand asset total for December 2021 of $3,485,185.03. I'd like to move to approve the treasurer's report dated December 2021 as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries.
All right, we'll take a look at the payment of accounts payable bills dated December 16th, 2021 through January 12th, 2022. See, I did it. Thought for sure I was gonna screw up the years.
Nice job.
My only job tonight. Checks numbered 70723 through 70801, as well as 202100374 through 202100517. The total for this month's checks is $643,492.03. To move to approve the payment of accounts payable bills dated 12/16/21 through 1/12/22.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Awesome, thank you.
Minutes of the special school board meeting, 12/21/2021, as printed or amended.
Motion to approve the minutes of the special school board meeting dated 12/21/2021 as printed and/or amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We have the minutes same evening of the regular school board meeting, 12/21/2021, as printed or amended.
A motion to approve the minutes of the regular school board meeting dated 12/21/2021 as printed and/or amended.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Busy month. We have the minutes of the special school board facilities referendum retreat on 1/13/2022 as printed or amended.
Motion to approve the minutes of the special school board facilities/referendum retreat dated 1/13/2022 as printed and/or amended.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Lastly, the minutes of the special school board meeting 1/13/2022 as printed or amended.
I motion to approve the minutes of the special school board meeting dated 1/13/2022 as printed and/or amended.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comments, we do not, nothing was submitted, and we do not have anyone here in the room, so thank you very much.
So just and some of this is going to be repeat for board members, but I want our community to be able to see the thought and discussion that went into this next item. We've known for quite some time that the district faced a revenue cliff after this school year. And the reason for that is the last referendum that was passed was a 3-year non-recurring referendum. So if you take a look at the drawing, you can see that going into next year, there will be a significant drop in funding for the school district, about $3.6 million less annually to provide programming and support for the next school year. As I mentioned, we are just coming off of a 3-year non-recurring referendum that was passed April 2019, again with the intention of it, I'm certain the board at that time had the thought in mind that they would relook then after that 3 years to determine how to move forward after that. In 2022-2023, the revenue limit would drop by $3.6 million. We believe at a minimum, just to keep the lights on, keep salaries paid, that type of thing, reasonable class sizes, doors open, the district will need at least $1.5 million annually to do that. The question might have been, so what was the difference between the $1.5 million and the 3.6, which was what was approved in the last referendum? That additional funding went towards some of our facility maintenance needs, replacing roofs, replacing the elevator, replacing, various kind of keeping on track. We had some water issues and things like that. So that money on an annual basis went into those types of projects. Some of it, because of some of the supply chain shortages, also went into our facilities fund, so that Fund 46, so there is some money there available to be spent on facility maintenance and improvement. Just in a ballpark, you can see kind of in developing the school tax levy this last school year, the district did not have any referendum debt. Many districts do. So you can see that there was the tax levy portion, and then there was the non-recurring referenda to come together to that total tax levy of $7.4 million. Mill rate this last year of $6.86. A lot of discussion then the board around referenda. Just a reminder, there are 4 options for referendum questions. One could be a non-recurring for operational expenses, which is what we presently had the last 3 years. Recurring for operational expenses, we'll a little bit later discuss maybe why the board might not want to consider something like that. A bonding referendum, meaning borrowing money for improvement of facilities, and then a combination. So in other words, a 2-question referendum. We had gone through a pretty extensive process of identifying what some of those facility maintenance needs were, some of the useful life projections, areas where we were no longer in code for our building. And as part of that process, identified about $7 million worth of facility improvements that were needed. And that's something that we've chipped away at somewhat. Certainly we weren't able to address all of that, but we've been addressing some of those items that were identified. And then when the board really got into some of that retreat and in the really kind of starting to discuss and figure out where we were looking at, there really kind of developed a couple different options. One was to address our pressing maintenance needs. That would be that $7 million. One would be to really look at the footprint of our present building and kind of do a full building remodel, but not changing the footprint. That was about $27 million. To do an update for growth and ideal, it was again, no area in the building untouched, so remodeling within the building, and then the addition of a separate 4K, 5K center, that would have been about $38 million. And then a lot of discussion from there with the board on what we call a levy boundary. So in other words, given where we're at right now with our levy, what could the district do that would not increase the levy based on those referendum dollars from the last referendum? So a real focus on what I would call fiscal responsibility and saying, all of these things may be nice. What can the district afford without passing additional cost back on to our taxpayers? So out of that then, in thinking about that kind of 18 million figure, we started reaching out to staff, families, and we had also reached out to a facility focus group and asked them to identify some priorities, ranging from 1 being high priority to 5 should not be considered. So in this type of a survey, the lower the number, the higher the priority. So if you look at top 6 identified by staff, improving accessibility for students and community members with disabilities, inclusive playgrounds, that type of thing. Demolishing the oldest sections of the building that require significant ongoing maintenance. Updating classrooms in the older sections of the building. Adding or improving playground and outdoor learning collaboration spaces, rehabbing technology lab space or large group instruction spaces, and adding and improving science lab space. Then if you look at our parents, a little bit different, but that would make sense. Their number 1 was adding and improving science lab space, making available to all grade levels, improving accessibility for our students and community members with disabilities, adding and improving parent pickup and drop-off, adding and improving playground and outdoor learning spaces, adding student creative experimentation or makerspace areas, and significant renovation of the oldest sections of the building. So a little bit different kind of a focus on maybe not kind of tearing down, doing more of the renovation. And then our facility focus group, remember this is a group that went on an extensive tour of the building, kind of went through all of the different spaces, had an opportunity to go through the whole building and kind of make some recommendations. And theirs were a little different also. They're number 1, and I think part of that is that tour through the building, demolishing those oldest sections of our building that require significant ongoing maintenance, adding and improving playground, rehabbing technology lab space. One of the things that group pretty consistently said is there is space in the building, it's just presently not good usable space for learning. Adding and improving science lab space, improving accessibility, and adding that kind of student creative experimentation or maker space. Then I tried to just kind of boil it down. What were the top priorities identified by all 3 groups? Number 1, adding and improving science lab space and making available to all grade levels. Improving accessibility for students and community members with disabilities. And then what were those priorities identified by 2 of the 3 groups? Again, trying to focus in on where was the support for the different changes. Number 1, demolishing the old sections of the building that require significant ongoing maintenance or significant rehabilitation. I think what was interesting by this were both of those were groups that either live in the building, so our staff, or our facility group that had that opportunity to really tour through. Adding and improving playground and outdoor learning collaboration spaces. I distinctly heard some of our parents say they would be very pleased to never see another pebble come out of our interior playground. Rehabbing technology lab space or large group instruction spaces that are minimally used now due to classroom technology or one-to-one technology devices into student learning spaces. Adding student creative experimentation or makerspace areas inside the school for making, learning, exploring, and sharing. So those were kind of the key takeaways. And then in looking at the board process, really a focus on to seek a balance of addressing student needs, staff needs, community needs, and yet be fiscally responsible. So we had our facility study in the spring of 2020 involving engineering, construction, and architectural professionals, doing an educational space analysis, multiple options presented to the board with costing, staff and family surveys, family focus group, multiple board retreats to go over those survey results, options, and work with financial consultants. The board has been engaged in this process for about 2 years now. So going back to that revenue cliff, looking a little differently at the different options, the non-recurring for operational expenses, which is what we have now, would maintain our programming and address our immediate maintenance needs, but it would not provide for any improvement in our facilities or updating of our facilities.
Now, Connie, with that, if that were to be what it ended up being, which I'm not in favor of, by the way, I just thought I'd state that just from a personal standpoint. What impact overall is that going to have on the use of the building, particularly these areas that are not usable and also areas of accessibility?
So they would not improve. So, some of the kind of minor, some of the ones that were identified in the facility study, but remember in the facility study, most of what they talked about was demolishing that section of the building where a lot of our lack of handicapped accessibility is. But I would frame this one or define this one as a chipping away around the edges. So you're maintaining the building and keeping it from getting significantly worse, but you're not doing any significant improvement to the building. Okay. So your investment and cost in it is really just kind of keeping it open. You could do a recurring for operational expenses. This would maintain programming, but it can't account for future changes in inflation or changes in expanded programming. You could do a bonding referendum, which would be to borrow money for improvement of the facilities, which would address maintenance and building improvement, but would not maintain programming. And one of the significant aspects of maintaining programming is class size and maintaining the outstanding staff that we have with employee compensation. So the last option is the combination, so the 2 question. This would both maintain our programming plus address maintenance and facility improvement needs to meet those new identified needs. So I think that's where the board started going down a little bit further down that road and looking at the 2 question. So just looking at our overall historic mill rate, you can see our mill rate has been flat and in the last couple years has actually declined. So we're at 686 this year. Back in 2013-14, it was at 779. So we've continued little by little to decline on that.
Could you give a brief explanation of mill rate, please?
So mill rate is, well, I'm going to turn to our financial expert on that.
Yeah, so I guess the simplest way to understand the mill rate is it's the amount per $1,000 of property value that you pay for property taxes. So for every $1,000, a resident of the Salem School District would pay $6.86 for every $1,000 of the property value. So if they had a $100,000 house, you would be paying $686 towards school property taxes. If you had a $200,000 house, it'd be, $1,372.
Head math, all right.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's the simplest way to talk about it.
Thank you.
So then, in looking at that mill rate, I wanted to put it in context for our surrounding districts so you could see kind of where we fall with other districts. Right now, we're actually the third highest, so not the highest, not the lowest, but I do think it's important to recognize that Wheatland, Bristol, at least a couple other, Trevor, will be going also to referendum. And so if we were not to go to referendum, we'd be down on the lowest end. I mean, so in other words, by the time you dropped off that 3.6 million, what would our, just ballpark?
Yeah, it'd be in the $4.50 range.
Somewhere down on the lowest end. So anything that we've been talking about doing would not change that position for us if it were to pass. So again, the goal is to keep that levy flat for referendum. So in other words, the referendum that we had, the new one, they essentially in that overall mill rate would replace each other, would be the goal. So again, just another same way of looking at it. You saw the non-recurring referendum on the one side, the referendum debt on the other side being zero. Going to a two question, then you're coming together for that same tax levy. It's just coming from two different referenda questions. One being the non-recurring, which will drop significantly. The other being the debt. Coming together would have the same impact of the mill rate going across. Another way of looking at it, if you take a look at 2021-22, the goal then would be, based on that levy bound, which is what we had talked about, would maintain that same level of mill rate. Now, could mill rates still go up? Yes, because your actual operating, the revenue limit that the state gives you could change because you have more students, could go down because you have less students. The state could add some money. The state could keep our revenue cap flat, which would, there are other factors there, but that part dedicated to referenda would not change. Okay, so that would stay the same under any of the scenarios that we're talking about.
Connie, if we looked at the issue about the bonding rate, where is that now, and what's the anticipated possible could-be numbers?
So when we asked Baird Financial, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but Baird Financial estimated at 3% interest. I talked to her today. She said the going rate right now is 2%. She does not see it getting higher than 2.5%. So she felt that the 3% was a very conservative, because remember, if the goal is to keep that levy at a certain rate, you're gonna want to make sure that you're coming in under instead of coming in over. And she says, according to her, she believes that the two, even if we went 2.5, she felt would be conservative. But they do 3% just to make sure. Yep. So what would that look like? So in other words, a levy-bound referenda, so that 18.3 million, which is what Baird has said that we could borrow up to 18.3, amortized over 10 years, that would keep our levy flat. Focusing on maintenance, safety, and our learning environments. I won't go deep into this map. It's just a kind of an overall, because I'll break it down a little bit. You can see, but everywhere in this that you see blue or you see orange is where there is some improvement being made to the building. Orange is typically a lighter improvement. Blue is more heavy kind of demolition and improvement. So what would this include? It would include an expanded and remodeled 4K and 5K. Right now we have 3 nice-sized 5K rooms, kindergarten rooms. This would give us 5 really nice-sized kindergarten rooms down on that end of the building. It would add an additional 4K, actually 2 additional 4K rooms, and remodeled, and then allowing some space for around that, for example, for special education support and things like that. But it adds and remodels some of our 4K and 5K rooms. It provides some improved and expanded science labs and discovery makerspace areas. As you see in this first picture where you see the blue where it says lab, that's adjacent to the courtyard. It's kind of going down towards the library. Right now we have a science lab for our 7th grade, and we have a science lab for our 8th grade. We don't have a dedicated 6th grade science lab. This would create 3 updated, modernized science labs for our students. And then it also takes, there's some spaces down on the far end of the building that used to be family consumer ed and tech ed classrooms. It connects those 2 rooms and creates a space for what you would call lab type activities. Could be makerspace, could be kind of more tech ed oriented, could be kind of science oriented, but there's spaces for kids to build and experiment and problem solve and work in collaboration, and would even be then where that family consumer ed room is connected to the outside with the goal of doing more of that potentially environmental or outside type science type work in that area of the building. It also takes that oldest section of the building, and we'll talk about kind of where there's some demolishing going on. Under this plan, it demolishes that very oldest middle section of the building. It doesn't demolish the business wing and the technology wing that we have. It maintains that. So rather than taking down that whole section, it does maintain that, but it takes down that oldest section of the building that for us right now, visibly from the street, you can't really even see it anymore. It's got some of our kind of trash containers, and it is kind of the oldest section. It is only used for it's not to code to have any sort of learning or anything like that. It's pretty much used as storage space. And again, one of the areas of discussion around that space for the groups going through is the extensive amount of dollars it would take to make that space workable and usable space, the dollars that would end up going into maintaining that space over the years that's not being used, and the dollars that go into heating and that whole area of the building. So what this would do is it would take that down. It would open up the cafeteria in the back and some space to be able to do some kind of playground and that type of thing. But there is, on that business wing, there's a garage there, like a 2-3 car garage, which could become a really nice kind of messy area for kids to work and build and do some collaborative type work in there. And then, of course, facing that corner, you could create then both some environmental kind of landscaping on that back corner, connection to that discovery lab where students are able to work and collaborate, and then coming down to some improved playground space down at the end there for our students, because we know that's an area of need that was identified. Obviously, the improved outdoor areas, playground areas, significant remodel of the concrete jungle in the middle of the building, significant remodeling on that far end of the building where the cafeteria is right now, and improvement of playground spaces.
Whose job would it be to pick up all of the pea gravel?
So my plan at the end of the year is that every day for the last month, we'll send each of the kids home with a handful of pebbles. And they're not able to leave until they've got their handful. And they could
Kinda like
take those
Shawshank
home.
Redemption.
Right. They could take those home to do either science projects or art projects, but they should stay at home with their parents.
Great plan.
So that would be the plan.
Okay, good.
This would add some student support and collaboration spaces. Right now, what we have are multiple cases of where we have a full classroom that may be used with a special ed teacher to work with 1 or 2 kids. And a lack of kind of space for some of our support staff professionals. And so what this would do is we have some very undesirable rooms in the building that are, maybe don't have windows, for example. So not great classroom space where kids are there all day. It would take some of those spaces and it would build a couple smaller, I guess you would say offices, but could also be student learning collaboration spaces in one section of the room and then a larger open kind of space. Our hope would be down the road that we would move away from those being special education and they could be for use for all students. For example, students working on a project together. It sets up these collaboration spaces so that there's at least one for every 2 grade levels to be able to share. So if you think about in the past, would be fairly typical to have a special ed room at 7th grade, special ed room at 8th grade. This would kind of create more of a space for, so that you're only taking up 1 classroom, but also for our general education students in use for collaboration as well. Updated classrooms, if you've been in that 4th and 5th grade wing, you know that those classrooms are in pretty significant need of being updated, whether it's casework or, you know, the sinks and everything else in those areas have been pretty untouched for many years. So kind of throughout the building. And then some significant safety and accessibility improvements. After this would be done, there would be handicapped accessibility to all student spaces with the use of lifts or grading. So there would be no spaces now that our students would not be accessible. A prime example would be if you think about the elementary middle school music room or elementary music room. Right now, they've got to go down this maze of hallways and all the way around and then through the gym and then up through just to get into the music room. And that's really, I mean, really unfortunate. I actually, the other night when I was here and we had our parent focus groups, I had to stop and really think about if we had somebody from the community with a, you know, that maybe was disabled and was not able to, you know, needed to access our handicapped accessibility, I had to really stop and think about how I would even get them through to get into that gym for that. And clearly that's not what we as a district want for our community. So it addresses issues like that. The other thing, obviously, school safety has been on everybody's mind, our parents' minds. It would include what you'd call automatic door locks and indicators. So with the push of a button, you could lock every single door in the building from exterior. That's huge for our building. We have a very large building with many, many doors that creates some vulnerability for us. It also has indicators so that we would know if a door's been propped open in the building anywhere. That's not something that we have available now. And it would create some separation doors between some of the grade levels so that you could lock down sections of the building much more quickly and rapidly than we're able to do now.
Have we looked at potential, I mean, with regards to safety and accessibility, what portion or what percentage rather of the budget would be needed to do something that would meet all these requirements?
So if you recall, when I gave you that costing sheet from Kramer Brothers, I don't have it here with me right now, but it does have those, like what are those automatic door locks and that. I want to say, if I recall when I talked with her, the automatic door locks and indicators and separation doors was in that 600 to 800,000 kind of ballpark, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
Part of that system, if I recall, would give enough notice or information to the administrative staff if a door was left open or
propped open.
or
Yep.
something like that, right?
So typically under that kind of a system, what you have is there is a general alarm. So in other words, a door opens, there is that kind of initial, so like if you're in the immediate area, you can hear that sound. And then if it's not closed then within 30 seconds, then it sends an indication that the door has not closed. And then somebody in the office would know if that door has been, has been propped open.
Okay, thank you.
So. And I would say, one of the things I would say is that's pretty standard now in all buildings. The other thing too, in terms of, and I don't have this on here, whenever you're doing renovation to spaces, you have to meet certain safety codes. So it would then install a sprinkler system through the building. Right now, in many of the areas of our building, we don't have a fire suppression sprinkler system, so it would include that as well. So again, back to that hypothetical revenue limit. What I talked about in this kind of design elements and project is really right in the kind of ballpark of about 21 million, somewhere in there. But remember, we talked about how we had about 2 million in our Fund 46. We've also chipped away at some of those maintenance items over the last couple years because of the referendum. So we really feel like we can accomplish most of that, and fairly conservatively, because they have a 10% contingency built in. So if, for example, wages increase or materials goes up, or they run into difficulty with building, like asbestos or things that become uncovered that we weren't expecting, there is a contingency built in those costing estimates. So we believe that we can accomplish that with about that, somewhere in that 18.3 million ballpark. The 18.3 is what Baird has told us if we wanted to amortize over 10 years, that would keep our levy for referenda flat at that 18.3. So one of the questions the board asked then, and this is a little more of a complicated chart, but what would it mean if we went from 18.3 down to 17.3? What would that do? What if instead of thinking about 10 years, we thought about 12 years or 15 years? What if on our non-recurring operating referenda, instead of 1.5, we went with a 1.4 or we went with a 1.3? So if you look at this chart, it's a little bit confusing, but go all the way kind of to mid-range where you see the zeros in black. Okay, that would be an $18.3 million bonding referendum plus a 1.5 million operating, meaning that it would keep the levy flat. So in other words, there would be zero impact on the levy. If you change those things, it would decrease that levy. So for example, if you went from an 18.3 million down to a 17.3 million, the mill rate impact would be a drop of 11 cents. An annual tax impact on a $100,000 property would be a decrease of $11. 200 a decrease of 22, 300 a decrease of $33, okay, for the $300,000 property. So depending on where you go, then let's say, for example, instead of a 10-year, we went to a 12-year amortization. It would decrease the mill rate by 28 cents. The annual impact on a $100,000 property would be $28 less. So do you get kind of how to read that?
Smart.
Okay. So, and again, I want to clarify, this chart is all about less than. The mid-range, 18.3 million, 1.5 million operating, is a flat levy referenda. So, you know, people are always, how can you spend $18 million and not increase our taxes? Again, it's because of that substitution of the 3-year non-recurring referenda with the 2-question bonding and the non-recurring $1.5 million referenda. So at this point, I have worked with Quarles and Brady to come up with what would need to be the resolution language if the board were to go forward with those 2 questions. If you recall at our retreat the other night, the board wasn't quite sure where they wanted to come in on those, and so I have them left blank for now for the board to make that decision. The first one would be a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed the revenue limit for 3 years for non-recurring purposes. What I initially shared with the board was that 1.5 million. If a decision to change the 1.5 million is made, then whoever would make that, if somebody wants to make a motion, would read this motion and then put the amount that they felt needed to be put in there. 3 separate potential resolutions I'm going to ask you to consider, one being the 3-year non-recurring, one being the bonding, and one is that 3rd piece where you have to authorize a referenda. Okay?
Connie, where would
Questions?
the 10-year, the 12-year, or the 15-year be put into the motion?
That is not part of the motion. That's how the district decides with their bonding agent how to borrow the money.
Okay.
Yep. But certainly when you provide information to the community in trying to evaluate, you would want to share with the community what the board plan is. Is the board's plan to look potentially at a 10-year payback, a 12-year payback, or a 15? Because that gives your voters the best idea. Now, you could potentially say, we're going to do a 10-year, and then you get a very favorable interest rate that allows you to pay it off in 11 years. I mean, you could potentially have something like that happen. It would be, the intent going into it would be to finance it over X many years. But that doesn't have to be part of the referenda. I would recommend, though, in your discussion, you make a decision as to what that would look like so that we can then project out for our community members what the impact on the levy would be. A lot of information.
I think looking at the first resolution there, I mean, I think the projections of the 1.5 are a pretty important factor to consider. I don't feel comfortable going down from there. I mean,
On the
that's-
1.5?
On the 1.5
Yep, I
for the
agree.
non-reoccurring piece. I feel like that's a
We need that.
kind of a bare minimum just to run the facility and, you know, like address some very basic
class sizes.
needs that we have, those are the basic commitments we've made to the community.
I think, and there was a question by one of our community members about, what about with inflation? Should that be 1.5? Should that be 1.6 the next year, 1.7 the next year? And in talking with our esteemed financial professional at the table, my concern initially with that, or my perspective on that was, we will actually decline close to that $100,000 mark due to some of the retirement commitments that we made. And so we feel comfortable because of that decline, that maintaining that 1.5 is going to give us what we need for the 3 years. It would be, though, exactly why I would say doing a recurring that goes into perpetuity, that 1.5 will become less and less over time.
Well, and as we've discussed also, how the ESSER funds are out there, in the state, and the catch-up, and all those things that we talked about last week.
I think the 18.3 is probably the 18,300,000, based on the figures that we've seen, is probably the most desirable, amount to get what we need done. And when I look at the year to defer the loan to, we're not ever going to see these kind of interest rates again. So when we have the ability to defer a little bit longer to help, not only, we're going to maintain a nice interest rate, but it's also going to show that we're actually trying to make a forward push to lower taxes for the taxpayers and take advantage of an interest rate. I think that puts us in a win-win-win situation altogether, personally. My thought, though, is the 12 or the 15 then at that point. So it'd be 12 or 15, 18.3, and the 1.5 for operation.
I agree.
And the only caution I would give you on going to the 15-year, and this is just food for thought. One of the realities of this area of the state is it's very difficult to predict what student population growth could be. Now, certainly you have an ability to refinance and pay off sooner, but I think it would be very unlikely to go out 15 years and not see some fairly significant population growth. I can't guarantee that would be the case. But if you did have a fair amount of population growth within that 15 years, it's much more difficult to layer referenda on top of referenda. And so, again, the reason we initially went with 10, and I think, so then maybe you consider 12, was the idea that 10 years from now, this area could look fairly different population-wise. So just as a caution, but again, if you go the 15 years, there's nothing to prevent you 10 years from now, 5 years from now, from refinancing that.
Refinancing, I don't think is going to be an option in the future. To get
Percent would be higher,
Yeah, the
yeah.
interest rate's going to go up. So I think whatever decision we make, it's going to be with an idea down the road. We're not refinancing it. Unless something crazy
Or
happens.
paying it off.
We can still pay it off.
Or pay it
early,
off
yeah.
early. And traditionally, as a district, we've paid off debt
Yeah,
early.
yeah.
Traditionally for probably the last 10 years at least, from what I've seen, I don't know where you guys are where are you guys on the 12 or the 15 then?
I like the 12
I
option.
like the 12, yeah.
Yeah.
It's still going down by a good chunk of, that's a decent amount.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree.
And like you said, lowering the mill rate a little bit could be a nice selling point. People would appreciate that we're making that effort.
yeah, well, I think where everything's going up, we can get everything, we kind of have our cake and eat it too, along with the taxpayer here, utilizing interest rates, deferring a loan for a little bit longer, and then decreasing taxes altogether. I think, that's a win-win-win-win situation.
And it's also showing that we are making whatever decision we make tonight in a rational way and not doing anything that's totally off the chart dollar-wise as far as the total referendum.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
I
like
think,
it.
you know, again, I focused on that word of being fiscally, you know, that kind of fiscally responsible.
Sure, absolutely.
And I know that many of the conversations that we've had in retreat and as a board have been around that idea that the pandemic has been difficult for families, had been difficult for the community, and finding a way to not now kind of go out there with something that is going to make that more difficult. So the focus has always, from my, you know, understanding of where we've been and where we've gone, has been around trying to maintain that levy, not add anything additional for our community taxpayers.
I think we're close here.
The key, though, I mean, I think that's going to be the piece, is going to be able to explain to our community the two questions and the need for those two questions, and that there isn't that increase in the levy. Now, you know, truth in advertising, obviously people's taxes would go down, but the cost to the district, that would be the other thing that you would have to weigh in doing that, and the impact on student programming and that. This would, everything that you've talked about so far would keep the levy flat. So in other words, by voting yes on this referendum, it would not increase the referenda part of our taxpayers, and potentially would even decrease that.
So the motion, does it have to be the entire language here, or?
Yes. Clearly with the amount then included in there.
Taking it?
I'll do the first one. All right. I motion to approve resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for 3 years for non-recurring purposes. Be resolved by the School Board of Salem School District, Kenosha County, Wisconsin, that the revenues included in the school district budget be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in section 121.91 Wisconsin statutes by the amount of $1.5 million per year, beginning with the 2022-2023 school year and ending with the 2024-2025 school year for non-recurring purposes consisting of general operation costs and maintaining educational programming.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Is there gonna be a question mark after that 1.5 million? Your voice kind
There's
of.
a pause.
No, I didn't.
There's a pause.
Is it comma?
Not going to add in that question mark.
Who's taking the next one?
I will, but do we say the range, or do we put in the 18.3?
Whatever, I mean,
All right.
so if that is what your motion
Yep,
is.
I move
that's-
to approve an initial resolution authorizing, the initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $18.3 million. Be it resolved by the School Board of the Salem School District, Kenosha County, Wisconsin, that there shall be issued pursuant to Chapter 67 of the Wisconsin statutes, general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $18.3 million for the public purpose of paying the cost of a school facility improvement project at the school building consisting of safety, security, site and capital maintenance improvements, renovations, and updates to educational spaces, including STEM and exploratory learning areas, and to create classroom space, removal of an older section of the school building and related renovations, and acquisition of furnishings, fixtures, and equipment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. This is exciting.
Yay.
Great.
And then the last is to the actual resolution providing for a referendum election,
So was the exceed amount not 18.3?
18.3.
I move trying to make sure I have the right wording here. I move to have the resolution providing for a referendum election on the questions of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for 3 years for non-recurring purposes, and an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $18.3 million.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Yay.
Woo!
Yes. It was a lot of work.
A lot of work and a lot of time, but I think, one of the things we talked a lot as we were discussing the various things is this concept of every inch for learning and making sure that every space that we have in this building is space that's usable and workable for our students for learning. So exciting stuff for the district. Action item onto the more mundane aspects would be our approval of the 2022-2023 open enrollment openings. We do this every year. We're required if we're going to not be open, so in other words, accept every student who requests to open enroll in the school district, the board actually has to take action to determine what those openings and guidelines are. You have to do it from two different perspectives. One is from the perspective of your regular education classrooms and students, and then the other is from the perspective of your special education programs and services. On the first side, it's a fairly easy kind of, you look to see what you're expecting for your class sizes, what you anticipate the student numbers will be. In most cases, you take, for example, 5th grade and you move it up to 6th grade. You take 6th grade, move it up to 7th grade. The only one that's a little more difficult to predict is 4K. And you really are kind of going off of what you've had in the past for that. So as you can see, looking at our numbers across grade levels, there's only really one grade level from a regular education perspective where we really can't, based on those desired class size limits, accept open enrollment students, and that would be in 1st grade. Going over to the other side, which is the special education side, we tried to look at that a little differently to try and determine what our needs were and where the spaces were. Part of the difficulty is there's so much fluctuation across grade levels that it's not nearly as easy to say, oh, well, we need one teacher for 2nd grade, we need one teacher for 3rd grade. So what we tried to do was to look at grade bands instead. So kind of looking at, we've got 3 grade levels, how many staff do we need in that particular area? So that if you have one class that's really big, potentially another class is really small, and so you may have some support kind of going back and forth to try and even that out. So in looking at those grade bands, you can see that we also at this point, or for this next school year, do not have openings in special education. The staffing that we have would be dedicated to the students that we have right now. So overall, what I'm asking the board to approve would be open enrollment openings in general education with the exception of 2nd grade, and the fact that we would not have any openings to open enrollment students in special education. Now, just to not have any confusion out there, that doesn't mean that students who are presently here in special education have to go somewhere else. This accounts for all of our students that are presently here in the building when we look at openings for next year. Judy, do you want to add anything to that?
You had made a comment about 2nd grade. I think you meant to say 1st grade.
I'm sorry, 1st grade. Yep. So 1st grade is the only grade where we don't have openings.
Connie, one of the things I wanted to ask, and I've had a lot of people in the community ask me these types of questions, with an approximate enrollment, depending on day, month, week, all those sorts of things, of about 1,000 students. When we look at these class sizes for a district this size, how does it compare to our neighboring school districts?
So I can't say for certain, but I believe it's quite low. When I came to the district, if you remember, we had fairly significantly higher class sizes. One of the things, there's studies that people can kind of argue over whether class size makes a difference. I always say, ask the teacher if you can tell the difference between 25 students in a classroom and 20. And there's a huge difference in that classroom. And so we sat down as an administrative team and really talked about what are those kind of ideal, I guess you would say, you can't always hit that, but that desired class size. And, you know, going forward then, I remember the board actually taking action to change the desired class sizes at that time, and that's what we've been using going forward. So you can see those on that side. And so we're in good shape. I mean, our class sizes at, you know, the K-5 first grade and second grade, we've been focused on that 20, which is a very nice class size. I mean, obviously 15's better. I mean, people, but those are good class sizes. And so, you know, I hope that answers your question, but.
Yeah, and so in reality, as I've said to a few people, in our situation, even though we have a much larger enrollment than most, if not all, of the elementary districts in our general area, that our class sizes are I think one time I used significantly lower, but I would say are outstanding.
So the board would actually need to approve the open enrollment openings for the 2022-2023 school year.
I move to approve the open enrollment openings for the 2022-2023 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Got one in.
Yes, nice job.
Good job.
These guys are fast.
We have review superintendent search materials. Could you like really speed through that fast and get,
Certainly try.
that'd be good, thanks.
Absolutely will try.
No, I mean the process. I mean, like, if you have somebody next week, that would be really great.
Yeah, we'll keep trying on that.
Maybe a bit later than that.
Right.
Like
2 weeks would be,
later.
I mean, I can handle 2 weeks, yep.
Okay, so we received 4 documents. It looks like Dan really needs the first 2, so why don't we focus on those first? How do you guys want to proceed? Do you want to shout out what your questions and changes are? Do you want to discuss generally speaking?
My only feedback, I felt like the candidate essay questions were, I didn't feel like that they aligned necessarily to the candidate profile strengths, like what we were looking for in that candidate, right? There
Okay.
were only 3 questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe we would consider, I don't want to take a whole meeting to write a bunch of questions.
Right.
But maybe we could send 1 or 2 to you that might align to each one
Be
of
better.
those categories. And then you can forward those on to Dan,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel like there were 4 or 5 in the candidate profile, like areas of I don't know, that we were looking for, that the community was looking for.
Aside from those 3,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you guys have thoughts on those questions?
I mean, to correspond with what Ted said there, it did feel a bit generic in nature.
Yeah, like tell me about how you communicate with people.
Yeah.
That was very,
And I'm not saying it's an incredibly complex thing to go find another superintendent for sure. And you know, Westby certainly has done this several times before, right? However, I think with how things are nowadays, with COVID and some of the discussion we've had, it can't just be stamped out like it's been in the past a little bit. I feel like it needs to be a bit more unique to what Ted said, but just different than what it's been in the past because so many people are staying put because of so many challenges going on right now in
Yep.
school districts.
Please write a scenario question.
Yeah, actually, that might.
May not.
Fine.
So you're going to be an interim for 2 years and COVID hits. What are you going to do?
That's funny.
so Dana, what would you like those questions sent to?
Do you guys remember when he needed this information? Was it tomorrow already? I knew but I don't recall what piece it was that he needed right away.
I think it was the profile.
Yeah, the email,
I don't know.
Yeah,
My
it's attached on the
kicked
agenda.
me out. I don't know why.
I thought I had the original.
well, why don't we find out and then
Yeah.
you can respond. Maybe Connie, if you could find out.
But if you already
in
have
there.
some questions in mind, then by tomorrow morning, I mean, if,
He might have, I mean, my guess is he has,
you can also say just start over.
he has, not start over, my guess is he has a bank of questions.
Yeah.
He's a
I
pretty.
just feel like there are 3, but we had a set of information in the candidate profile, like maybe 2 or 3 more that align to those topics.
That makes sense. Okay. But yes, if you guys have specific ones in mind, please just send them directly to me and I'll.
Right, and at the end of the day, as we talked about at the meeting with Dan, the 3 areas is the new superintendent, you know, what will her or his involvement and relationships be with parents, with teachers, with the board, and and the community.
Right.
I mean, those are the broad brush areas. And students, of course.
Yep.
Right? So, okay. So you would like them by,
How about tomorrow afternoon?
okay, good.
Okay, good. The district brochure. A lot of it's straightforward. I get that. And majority of it came from Connie. So it's more of a, do you want it worded different? Do you want, I noticed 0 red flags. So I was, did you guys have anything? It's the first one,
No, I know.
good. Okay, I thought we'd have more. And then really that focus group one, I think it's just a matter of, did you read? I mean, I know he gave us a summary, but really that's for reading and for understanding and having
It's
in your
the
head.
first 2 are the important ones.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the other focus group ones. Perfect. Okay. Any changes, thoughts, anything you want to share with Dan? Any other feedback
No,
on the materials? Okay, so really just the questions. Okay, so if you have questions in mind, send them to me tomorrow afternoon. If not, I'll just push back, have him come back with
Okay.
other questions.
Good.
Oh, good. Okay, I thought we would have more than this. Okay. Do you remember what he said? Did we have to reprove anything or we just had to discuss it?
There was some he
I
said
think we had to approve the profile, right?
The first document. So approve it as presented.
because that was the reason about getting it on the agenda for tonight.
Yep.
Well, I think it was also just so we could talk about it in a
Public forum.
setting, yeah. So I move to approve the candidate profile as presented.
Perfect. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we'll keep working on the questions. Everything else is approved.
Yep.
And we're good. Awesome.
Administrator reports.
All right, I will start up and hopefully be quick. Just wanted to keep you guys informed of some of the things that are coming out of my office or things that I've been working on over the last several weeks since we last met. We had to submit a couple DPI reports recently. Right before the break, actually, the day of the board meeting, they did a Wise Data Finance snapshot. So in the past, DPI, you had to submit a budget report in December. But now they've switched it over to this Wise Data Finance, and it's more of a in real time. It's connected to Skyward, so they can kind of see: are you doing your monthly bank reconciliations? Do you have everything coded correctly? And so the transition was pretty easy for us. We had a chart of accounts that matched DPI's, and wasn't too big of a deal. Obviously, there were a couple little errors that we just had to fix, but that went smoothly. And then Diane and I submitted our WISE staff preliminary certification last week, and that's related to staffing and do people have the right licenses and what are their contract amounts and years of service and things like that. So, go ahead.
Is everyone licensed?
Yes, we were able to submit the preliminary certification. There are people whose licenses are expiring at the end of the school year and a few other little follow-ups, but nothing has to be finished until, or the final submission isn't until the end of March.
Don't we have lifetime licenses in Wisconsin now, though?
So, a lot of our staff do have lifetime licenses, but then there are specialty areas, and then newer teachers are like on a 3-year cycle, and sometimes people have provisional licenses, and so there's a lot of those ins and outs. But yeah, a number of our staff do have lifetime licenses.
And even though they do have a lifetime license, they still have to provide background check and that in order to renew it. So, you know, in the past, you'd have to submit coursework or things like that, but there are some hoops you have to jump through to renew it every 5 years.
So yeah, so those are the two big reports that have happened since our last meeting. From a cash flow perspective, I just wanted to highlight what Ted had pointed out. Our January property tax payments have come through from all our municipalities, and so we kind of had our low point of cash from the Thanksgiving timeframe through the rest of through most of December. But now we're at a point now where we won't have to short-term borrow or do anything like that. So that's a good feeling. It's one less thing I'm always checking and making sure we have enough cash on hand. ESSER 3, so that's one of the that's the third round of the federal stimulus funds related to the COVID pandemic. We will have to submit a plan and fill out an application through DPI in March. And one of the requirements of this is that we have to do some consultation with stakeholders. So we will have some community either survey or presentation, things like that, coming up in this next month related to that, but we'll have additional updates coming
Would that be
soon.
done in a board meeting, or is that a separate meeting?
It'll be done outside of a board meeting, though maybe for the February board meeting, we can kind of present the plan or go over some of the highlights. And then the last thing is working on budget projections for next, the 22-23 school year. Obviously, the referendum and the recurring referendum was a big, big point in that budget projection. So now that's another piece of data I can add. But there's things coming in at the state level, and property valuations and things like that that are all going to be updated throughout the course from now until October when we certify. But just trying to get a better handle on what we're looking at. CPI was certified for next school year at 4.7, so that's something we'll have to consider. And 4.7, yep. So that's obviously higher than it's ever been in my lifetime. So yeah. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Volcanoes.
I'll be fairly brief. I just wanted to kind of point out some all the work that sixth grade students are doing, and obviously the reading teachers, Miss Thies and Miss Braun. So what they've been working on really since second quarter, they've been working on informational unit around geology. And the end of the unit basically was a presentation where kids were responsible for basically creating a book on a topic they had. So I'm just giving this one example. There's another one, but this one's obviously on volcanoes. And so Ms. Braun and Ms. Thies then took them through the entire process. While they were doing a rough draft, they did a lot of research, and it ended up being like a 12-page book. And kind of through this, so they have a table of contents. You can obviously see they identified keywords on some of the different pages. And then obviously they kind of introduced that topic initially. And you can kind of go to the next slide here a little bit. Then they had obviously their informational slides. They ended up having like 7 or 8 informational slides. And I just put like three or four on here. And then the next one they also had about the author section. This was Soren Peterson's project. And then they also had a glossary and a works cited page. I know the whole team, whole sixth grade was really excited about that. We also printed it off. Again, this one was just a brief one, obviously, on Miss Ava Harrison, who did hers on earthquakes. Kind of the next step now, they're going to kind of read and share those with the class. So that's kind of what they've been working on a lot in all of second quarter, and this was kind of the culmination of all their hard work. So I just wanted to show that. And the teachers did a great job, obviously, teaching it, and the students did a phenomenal job with the work, too. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Sean.
I liked her, she said messing with her brothers, or messing with her siblings. Honest.
It's important to get the facts in there.
That's right.
All right. So
So believe it or not, it's already time for enrollment for 4K and 5K. So we had a great launch to our full day 4K program this year. We have roughly 90 students enrolled. We've had nothing but good feedback about it. So we want to make sure we get that information out to families right away so that they can start looking at enrollment for next year. And especially it's because it's a first come, first served basis. And we had a lot of interest in our full day program. We want to make sure that we have the classes divided appropriately based on what families are looking for. So enrollment will begin next week, January 27th. And as soon as all the paperwork is turned in, then families can choose if they're going to do full day or the half day program, and then we can determine how many classes of each we'll have at that point. So
What have you found was the biggest advantage that parents have been saying about the full day versus half day?
the ease for families, having that consistency. A lot of our families were relying on daycare half day. So if the children are able to be here full day and then experiencing learning throughout the day rather than whatever time fillers or activities they might have in daycare, that's been some really good feedback we've gotten.
Okay, great, thank you.
Have we had any kind of study or do a study in the future perhaps about how the full day compares to the half day 4K as far as, educational advancement?
Yes, so we did start this year some assessments so that we can track our 4K students half day and full day. We'll be able to track them at least through second grade with this particular assessment so that we can get some comparison along the way.
Sure, okay.
And I think part of the key too isn't necessarily comparing kids whose families have chosen to do the half day as opposed to the full day, but taking a look at the potential impact based on what we knew in the past for kids that were all of our half day kids, and then kind of moving forward to see if that's addressed some of those closing the gap issues, which was what we were kind of hoping to accomplish.
And there are a lot of other pieces involved too, social, emotional, what benefit does school have for kids, not just the academic piece, but that whole learning and being able to be ready for kindergarten piece of it.
Just a question from memory. What kind of testing do you do with these little ones when you bring them in? We used to have the whole area closed off with hearing tests and vision tests and.
So those screenings are done separately. The assessments that we're doing with kids in class are more beginning reading skills, beginning math skills. And then if there are concerns that families have, then we'll assess deeper, doing the vision screenings and the hearing screenings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, Judy.
We started off tonight doing a shout out to all of the staff, for all of their hard work and really staying dedicated throughout this time. I just wanted to highlight a little group of people though that are kind of going above and beyond. That's our student services team. So we've been using them a lot in the classroom, stepping in, filling in. And so it's not just enough, they still have their daily job that they have to do, but in addition to that, we're really reaching out to them and asking them to go above and beyond. So people like Erin Lockhoff and Anna Knacker, Judy Richter, Carrie Galley, Zach Paul, Pam Llewellyn, Sarah Bartz, and Craig Ballou. They're stepping in. It's tough, it's hard on everyone, but they're doing it and they're really making sure that we stay open. So I just wanted to say a special thank you to that group of student services team. And the other group is our school nurses. I remember going through these interviews this summer. We're like, yeah, COVID was last year. It was crazy. It's going to be so much easier this year. We're not going to have that much. And even last year we had just a tiny little bit. So even if we do that, it's going to be a tiny little bit. Well, as you know, it's been bigger than ever. And so we've got 2 brand new people in the nurse's office, and they've been champions. They continue to take all the parent phone calls and put the parents at ease and making sure that they call every single parent back as best they possibly can. Plus, in addition, they're still dealing with the scrapes and bruises and bumps and ice packs and Band-Aids and everything else that go along with it. But Brianna and Nikki have been true troopers. So if you ever get a chance just to say thank you, please give that team a shout out too.
Thank you, Jim.
We have a phone system where when they call me, it actually comes in as nurse 1 or nurse 2. And pretty much every day I pick up the phone and go, yes. And then it's always prefaced by, it's not that bad. But they've been amazing. I have to say, it's been having them, so.
Good.
So committee reports, at this point, we have none, because we had a ton of other meetings, but no committee meetings. I would request a schedule, so I'll send out to get some times from you. A significant aspect of referendum preparation is to inform the community. And so what I would like to do is to meet with our Building and Grounds Committee, and then also meet with our Policy and Community Relations Committee to talk about the role that they may be able to, that those committees may play in getting the word out to the community in terms of what the referendum is about, what the impact of the referendum is, that informational source. Just so you as board members know, I mean, one of the forms that you will be getting will be information that tells you what the do's and don'ts are about referendums in terms of what you're able to do and what you're not. But one of the most significant aspects of board members is to help provide the community with information about the referendum and the impact of the referendum. So I will likely be calling on all of you, but I'd like to start that conversation with our 2 committees. So I'll be sending something out and asking for when I can meet with you on those. Board meetings coming up. We have a regular school board meeting at 7 p.m. Tuesday, February 22nd. Please do not think for a second that is the next time you're going to be needed. We will.
We would miss you guys so much.
We'll likely need to meet in special session retreat to address and develop the community information sharing process around the referendum. So, okay.
2/22/2022.
It is.
And it's Tuesday.
A Tuesday.
Tuesday, Tuesday.
Marquez is so excited right now.
I can tell he's writing that down.
It's like, oh,
We're already planning something big at school.
are you serious?
Oh, how could you not? Tuesday?
I don't get it.
2/22/22.
Nick, I'll talk to you after the board meeting. I'll show you.
We'll have Patty draw some pictures
2
for
minutes
you.
with you.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a
too
big
witty.
fan of the day after our last board meeting when it was 1-2-2-2-2-1.
Yes, I did think of you on
That's
that.
right.
Pretty much any number anomaly.
That's really amazing, because I thought he was like the only person in the entire county that was thinking about
that's
that.
him.
So that's good.
Well, it has to do with numbers, right, and not just
He
zeros
likes
and ones,
numbers.
which is the.
It's good
computer.
stuff.
Okay, no,
That's good.
never mind.
Don't get it.
Is that it? Sweet. I move to adjourn the meeting at 8:26.
Hold off 4 minutes.
I could, but I'd like to not, yeah.
I thought she was trying to push it for. Yeah, that was
I
awesome.
said 8:30.
Nope, 8:26.
Second.
A second.
Okay, perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.